Welcome dear student. أعزائي طلاب وطالبات الصف الخامس الابتدائي، أهلا بكم في أول حلقة من حلقات الترم الثاني في مادة العلوم باللغة الإنجليزية تحت رعاية وإشراف وزارة التربية والتعليم. So let's start our lesson. Lesson number 1 in the first unit called friction force. So what is friction؟ كلمة جديدة علينا. يعني إيه friction؟ friction بالعربي يعني الاحتكاك. يعني إيه احتكاك طيب؟ إحنا هنفسر ده خلال الدرس وهنفهمها كويس جدا جدا جدا. What is friction؟ تعالوا نبص على الصورتين اللي قدامنا دول. We have two persons here. One of them can move very easily and the other one slide down. واحد بيمشي بكل سهولة، بيمشي بكل ثقة، مش بيقع من الأرض، مش بيقع على الأرض. التاني اتزحلق ووقع. طيب ليه ده اتزحلق وليه التاني ما اتزحلقش؟ In the first image, the first boy on the left side, the touch between the shoes and the ground strong, so he can walk easily without sliding. So this boy can walk very easily without any slide. So he move strong, the touch between his shoes and the ground or the floor very strong, and this touch enable him to walk very easily. While the other one on the right side, the touch between his shoes and floor weak, so he slides on the floor. وقع واتزحلق على الأرض. ليه؟ Because the touch الاحتكاك اللي احنا التاتش ده هنفسره بعد كده بالاحتكاك. The touch between his shoes and the floor is weak. الفلور wet floor في water. الووتر ده خلى التاتش very weak. علشان كده هو وقع. طيب هنفسر ده بإيه؟ لسه ما فسرناش برضو. This touch between the two surfaces, the shoes and the floor, is a type of force known as friction force. التاتش ده أو التلامس ده بين التو surfaces نوع من force، نوع من القوة اسمه friction force. اسمه إيه؟ friction force. Perfect. لسه هنفسر تاني وهنقول الديفينيشن بتاع الفريكشن فورس. friction force it is the force between two surfaces in contact. in contact means إن هم لامسين بعض أو يعني خلاص هم surface وفوقيه surface تاني. they are in touch. in contact that act in direction opposite to direction of motion and causes the object to slow down and stop. يبقى عندنا في two types of force. movement force و friction force. الموفمنت فورس act in a direction. الفريكشن فورس act أو بتأثر في direction opposite عكس الدايركشن بتاع الموفمنت. يبقى أنا دلوقتي عندي سيرفيس زي البلوك اللي قدامي ده أو زي البوكس اللي قدامي ده، هو بيلمس الفلور أو لامس الجراوند. التاتش بينهم اسمه friction force. طيب حد يقول لي الفريكشن فورس act in a direction opposite or the same direction as movement force؟ لا، opposite direction يعني direction عكس الموفمنت فورس. نكمل وهنعرف أكتر عن الفريكشن فورس. Example of friction force: the friction force between your body and the slide. When you slide down on a slide, there will be a touch, like friction, between your body and the slide. Who can tell me the touch between your body and the slide, strong or weak? Of course it's weak. And if we add water to the slide, it will get even weaker. It will be very weak. And the friction will get weaker also. When a car moves on a road, there will be a touch between the car and the road. Between the tires of car and the road. بين العجل بتاع العربية وبين الطريق هيبقى في touch، في contact. ده بنسميه برضو friction force. وأكيد act in opposite direction. Another example of friction force أو حاجة تانية بنشوف فيها friction force: when you rub your hand together you feel warm. Why we feel warm when we rub our hands together because of what? Because of friction force. الفريكشن فورس produce heat energy، بينتج حرارة. احنا في الشتاء ممكن نحس بيها، هنحس ان احنا لو احنا عملنا rub our cold hand together it gets warmer. Why? Because friction force generate heat. يبقى ده برضو نوع من الفريكشن فورس. هنا عندنا question مهم جدا. Gave reason if you push a toy car on floor or on the floor it moves for a certain distance till it stops. Why it stops? It stops because of friction force between toy and the floor. So this friction force act in opposite direction, so that's why the toy car will stop moving. Types of friction. There are 3 types of friction. Friction between solid objects. All of them are solid. Solid object and solid object. Both are solids. Number 2, friction between solid and air. Number 3, the friction between solid and water. We will explain each of them. هنفسر كل واحد بالراحة وهنفهم كل حاجة وإيه الفرق بينهم. So let's start with the first one, friction between solid objects. Friction between solid objects like this box and the ground. Between them, there is a touch. This touch between 2 objects or 2 surfaces, both are solids. السيرفيس اللي هو الفلور solid، البوكس solid، يبقى ده friction. The first type friction between solid objects. نفسر أكتر. If we have direction of movement that way، الموفمنت حد بيحاول يحرك البوكس ده في الاتجاه ده. طيب حد يعرف الفريكشن فورس هيبقى في أنهي اتجاه؟ مين يقدر يقول لي؟ friction force opposite direction. Direction of movement this direction, so friction force in the opposite direction. جميل. طيب هتفرق؟ يعني هنعرف نزق الحاجة بقوة ونقدر نحركها لو الفريكشن فورس قوي جدا أقوى من الموفمنت بتاعتنا؟ ده هنعرفه شوية. هنشوف واحد بيحاول يحرك البوكس. He succeeded. So there is friction force resist or the friction force act in opposite direction of movement between solid and solid. Here is an activity to show friction between solids. هنعمل تجربة جميلة جدا كلنا على فكرة بنعملها. أي حد عنده عجلة أو بيحب يركب عجل بيعيش التجربة دي على طول. Steps: ride a bike and push its pedals. Number 2, stop pedaling during movement of the bike. هنوقف الحركة بتاعتنا بس البايك هتستمر بتتحرك. It will still or keep moving. Observation: what we will observe, the bike continues moving in the same direction but its speed decreases gradually till stops. الدراجة بتاعتنا أو البايسكل بتاعتنا هتفضل تتحرك، بس هل هتتحرك بنفس السرعة بتاعتها وإحنا بطلنا نبدل؟ We stop pedaling? No, it will slow down. It will slow down till stops. Why? So what is the explanation؟ إحنا بنفسر إن هي وقفت ليه؟ هل في حد كان بيزقها عكس الدايركشن بتاع الموفمنت؟ أكيد لأ، بس في force against the movement force in opposite direction of movement called friction force. So the explanation: when the bike tires touch the road, the friction force arises that affect in opposite direction of the movement. Act in opposite direction of movement. عكس اتجاه الحركة. طيب ايه تاني؟ When we stop pedaling, the friction force increases, so the bike slows down until stops. البايك بتاعتنا slows down، هتبطأ لغاية لما تقف خالص. احنا بطلنا نبدل. طيب conclusion, general conclusion. So what we have in this conclusion? First, friction force arises when 2 objects or 2 surfaces touch each other. When 2 surfaces touch each other, في friction force between these objects. The direction of friction force is opposite direction or opposite to the direction of movement. If we move the object toward right, the friction force will act onto the left side. Number 3, friction force is the reason for stopping the body during motion. Everybody stops moving or stop moving. Why? Because of friction force. The last thing, the body doesn't move if force of friction larger than force of movement. If the force of friction is very large and the movement force very weak force, so the object will not move. الأوبجكت مش هيتحرك لو في فريكشن قوي جدا، في تاتش جامد جدا بينه وبين الجراوند واحنا بنحاول نزقه، مش هنقدر نحركه. وانا عاوز افسر الجزئيه دي برضو بصوره افضل، تعالوا نشوفها تاني. So we have 3 examples. The same person tried to push a box in 3 cases. So let's start with the first one. A box here, and a person tries to push this box, but the floor is something like that. So how many types of forces do we have? We have force acting in this direction of movement, called movement force. So this is movement force. Another force acting in the opposite direction, called friction force. So here, friction force more than movement force. So this person can't move the box. In this case, this person can't move the box. So this box will still in its place without any motion. Why? Because friction force more than movement force. Another example. The same person also. This person tried to push the same box, but this time on a surface which is smooth surface. So he is still trying to move this box. How many forces do we have? ايه الفورسز اللي احنا عندنا؟ ايه القوة اللي عندنا؟ تاني نفس القوة، هنا اتجاه اللي بيزق فيه اسمه ايه؟ movement. movement force. طيب الاتجاه التاني، عاوز حد يقول لي شاطر يكون يقول لي الاتجاه التاني اللي هو opposite direction اسمه ايه؟ اسمه friction force. طيب المرة دي في حاجة مختلفة شوية. The friction force less than movement force. So this object will move in this direction. الأوبجكت ده هيقدر يمشي. That's why this boy will be happy because he can move the box. Another example, if he put wheels حط عجل على البوكس عشان يزقه، هيعرف يزقه easier or it will be harder. مش عارفين، نجرب. The same surface, the same box, and also the same person. But now he is trying to push it, and here is wheels to push this. This is the force of movement, and this is friction force. Of course, the movement will be very, very easy. It will move that way, and the movement will be faster and easier than this, and also than this, because this will not move anywhere. So he will be more happier. So let's continue. So let's continue. The next question gave reason It's a very easy question. When you stop pedaling during the movement of the bike, it slows down. Why it slows down? Because friction force act in opposite direction of motion. Because there are something called friction force act in opposite direction, so that's why it is slows down. The factors affecting friction. ايه العوامل ايه الحاجات اللي بتأثر على friction force? The first thing, type of material surface. Number 2, the speed of the body. Number 3, the surface area of movement. أول حاجة نوع الماتيريال اللي الأوبجكت بيمشي عليها. تاني حاجة the speed of the body، سرعة الجسم اللي بيتحرك ده، هل هو سريع ولا بطيء. Number 3, the surface area of a moving object. هنفسر surface area دي بطريقة بسيطة جدا جدا، بس لما نوصل لها نبدأ أول حاجة the type of material surface. Material surface could be rough surface or smooth surface. And when we roll a piece, a cylinder or marble on this rough material, it will move a certain distance, while in the smooth material, it will move distance larger, even larger than the rough material. So between smooth, the friction will be less or more. Smooth, the friction will be less. Between rough, the friction will be more. So here we have this boy try to push the box on a rough surface, so the friction will be strong friction or more friction, so the speed will be very slow. While when the same boy with the same box try to push it on smooth surface, so the friction will be less. الفريكشن هيكون أقل كتير on the smooth surface, so he can move it easier. The friction, small push with small friction or low friction. Activity to show the type of material that affect the friction force. Friction force and surface material. Tools, we need tools to need the surface material will be rough or smooth. So we have here tools, spring balance, hook, mug, and sticky tape. Okay, under the mug we will put something, we will put silk يعني حرير, we will put cardboard, and we will put a piece of carpet. ايه اللي هيفرق؟ هنشوف different reading in the three types. Step, fix the piece of carpet at the mug base using the sticky tape. Number 2, try to pull the mug by spring balance in constant speed. Number 3, notice the reading of spring scale. Replace the piece of carpet at the mug base with cardboard, silk, and the first one will be with what? With carpet. Amazing. Observation, the spring balance gave different reading for each material. Spring balance حاجة اسمها عامل زي ميزان بيقيس القوة, هيديني different forces. Why? Because friction force in silk will be less than cardboard, less than the cardboard and the carpet. Carpet هيبقى أكبر حاجة فيها friction because it is rough material. Friction depend on type of surface material. Friction increases between rough surfaces and decreases between smooth surfaces. Gave reason, friction force depend on type of material. Why? Because friction force increases between rough surfaces and decreases between smooth surfaces. The speed of the body. There are direct relation between speed of body and friction force. Direct relation means when speed increase, friction increase. And when speed decreases, so friction force decreases. That's called direct relation. علاقة مباشرة, ده بيزيد وده بيزيد, ده يقل ده يقل, يبقى دي اسمها direct relation. جميل. So when object move, it move with certain speed. So when object moves with high speed, by increasing the speed, the force increase or friction force increase. This car moves with high speed, so it have high friction. While object move with slow speed, so the friction will be less friction. Less or low speed, low friction. Easy. The surface area and of the moving object. Surface area means what? This paper have area, so the area gets bigger, so the surface area increase, and also gets bigger, so surface area increase, and bigger, surface area increase. So what will happen to friction? إيه اللي هيحصل للفريكشن؟ والsurface area بيكبر. By increasing surface area, also friction increase. It's a direct relation. There are direct relation between surface area of a moving body and friction force. Object with large surface area have large or friction force will increase when the surface area increase. Like this picture, surface area large, so friction force large also. B, object with small surface area. By decreasing surface area, the friction force decrease. A small piece of paper, so friction force decrease. Give reason. There is direct relation between surface area of a moving object and friction force, because by increasing surface area of a moving object, friction force increase. So let's move to questions. So let's answer some question on this lesson. Questions on lesson number 1. First question, choose the correct answer. Slows down moving object. What's friction force or movement force or heat energy? Of course, friction force slows down moving object. Why? Because it acts in opposite direction. Question number 2. Friction force act in a direction, space, the direction of motion. So perpendicular. What is perpendicular? Perpendicular means make angle 90. So something like that. This is perpendicular. Opposite, we know what's meant by opposite. Or parallel. Parallel means they don't intersect. Parallel. So friction act in which? Perpendicular, opposite, or parallel? Yeah, B. Opposite direction. Friction always act in opposite direction. When the surface area of a moving object increases, surface area increases, so the friction force doesn't change, decreases, or increases. Who know? We know that the relation between friction force and surface area, direct relation. By increasing surface area, yeah, so friction force increase. Perfect. Friction force increase. Also, when we decrease surface area, friction decrease. Fourth question, friction force depend on type of the material, the speed of moving object, the surface area of the moving object, or D, all previous answers. Yeah, depend on all of them, so we'll choose the last choice, D, all previous answers. Number 5, friction force increases by decreasing surface area, or between smooth surfaces, or between rough surfaces. Increases between what? Between by decreasing surface area or smooth or rough. We know friction increase between rough surfaces. بين الأسطح الخشنة هنلاقي الفريكشن فورس increase. Number 6, sliding a body down over another body means the friction between two bodies is space, the movement force. So smaller than, larger than, or equals to. Which one will be the right one? The object move, الجسم بيتحرك, يبقى friction more or less? Of course it will be less or smaller than the friction force. friction smaller than movement force. Perfect. So that's it for the question. So let's review what we studied in this lesson. So in this lesson, friction, we studied what is meant by friction, and we said the friction, it is a force act in opposite direction when two surfaces or two objects touch each other or being in contact with each other. Friction, there are three types of friction: friction between solids, friction between solid and air, friction between solid and water. And there are many things affecting many factors affecting friction. حاجات بتأثر على الفريكشن. أول حاجة قلناها كانت إيه؟ نفتكر مع بعض. قلنا surface area، وقلنا smooth and rough، وقلنا speed. A relation between surface area and speed, direct relation. Smooth and rough. Between smooth the friction is small, between rough friction is large. هنكمل الدرس ده في حلقة تانية إن شاء الله، وأشوفكم على خير.